Lafayette, Louisiana.
And they play with other kids all the time. But South Korea is going to be.
Okay, folks, welcome to the 2025 District 4 Teenage Baseball Rules Clinic. And today this is under the direction of Mr. Grayson Lawrence, and he is the ADA for Teenage Baseball for District 4. And Grayson, do you have a few things you want to say?
I do. Hey, thanks, Jim. And yeah, first off, I want to thank you and Don for putting on this rules clinic. It's always very well done and very well prepared. So thank you. I met some of you guys at the scheduling meeting that we had last week for those teams that were interleaguing or leagues that were interleaguing at 50-70 and juniors. If I didn't meet you, I am Grayson Lawrence. I am Teenage Baseball ADA for District 4. I help do the interleague coordination of games. I kind of pulled in the contacts. I'm kind of your point of escalation if you have any questions in regards to Teenage Baseball for District 4. My contact information is down there. Best to email me or text me, but feel free to also call me if there's any issues that pop up. Again, any questions around scheduling or questions on, kind of rules, Jim will get into that in terms of who you contact later on about if there's rule interpretation issues and things of that nature. So just want to thank everybody for volunteering. The league is a great organization, and it's a lot of time and effort to put in to manage a team. And I strongly believe in the teenage level divisions. So I just want to thank you for volunteering your time for this. And with that, I'll pass it back to Jim.
Okay, thank you, Grayson. Okay, I'm Jim Rose. I'm the California District 4 UIC, and I'm also the ADA for training for District 4, and I'll be presenting the rules clinic tonight. So this is a rules clinic that's designed for coaches, managers, umpires. I know we have coaches and managers and umpires out there listening to this. It's designed mostly for coaches and managers, but umpires get a lot out of this. We're going to focus on rules that are only specific to intermediate and junior league baseball. We'll also cover the new rules that should read 2025 rules, not 2024. And we're going to cover the interleague rules for intermediate and junior division and points of emphasis. And of course, we want to answer any and all questions tonight. So what we ask you is if you could leave yourself on mute for the clinic at the very end. When we're done, I'll be happy to talk to anyone live. And this clinic is being recorded, and like all our District 4 rules clinics, we post the video of it on our District 4 YouTube page. And again, there is another mistake. Sorry about that, folks. But it should read at CAD4, at CAD4. Okay. Can you hold on for just 1 second here? Okay. Just wanted to make sure everything was right there. Okay, so we're going to have a series of slides in this presentation. It'll be marked questions. And so that's when we'll answer your questions. So if you have a question, please use the chat function and address it only to Don Waddell. Don Waddell, he's going to be collecting the questions. And then when those question slides come up, then we'll be answering your questions. So again, please keep your microphones on mute. So we're going to be talking about rules tonight. We'll be talking about interleague and general rules. So I want to make sure that everybody knows the distinctions between the different kinds of rules that we use in Little League. So we have the official rules and regulations, and that is what we play all our games under. And they are in official rule books, or You can find them on a rule book app on your phone. Then there's something that we call local rules, and local rules are set by your league board of directors. Within the official rules and regulations, Little League gives a number of options for leagues to follow certain rules or not follow certain rules. To give you one example, there's actually a local option that when you're playing junior baseball, you can have 80-foot bases, base paths, instead of 90-foot. So those are the local options, and your league board of directors should have a set of local rules that your league will play by. None of those rules can contradict the official rules and regulations. They're just for those areas where Little League gives you options. Then we have interleague rules. And because you're here tonight, it means you're playing Little League or interleague, or you're going to be umpiring interleague. And so interleague rules are much like local rules. The ADA, Grayson Lawrence, has set these rules. And again, playing by the official rules, but where there's options given, District 4 and Grayson have decided what those rules will be. And then the final kind of rules that we have are ground rules. And these are just rules that are for a particular field of play. You have a tree overhanging the field. What do you do if a hit ball or a thrown ball hits that tree? Where are the dead ball areas on that field? Those are ground rules. Those should be covered before every game by the umpires and the managers. And again, they should be set by your league board of directors. So if you're umpiring on a field, or you're coaching or managing on a field, find out what those ground rules are. So here are the rule books. You can get them, order them in paper. Little League is kind of discouraging that, so they don't produce as many as they have in the past. But I would highly recommend that you all get the rule book app. You can get it from the App Store, from Google Play, whether you have Android or an Apple phone. And the wonderful thing about these rule books is that they are free to download and that they automatically update every year. So the new rules for 2025 just automatically get updated on your phone. And you'll find the official rules and regulations, and this is what they look like. There are regulations that cover things like mandatory play, pitching, decorum, and then we have the official playing rules in 9 parts. Rule 1 for objectives of the game, that's where you're going to find out about all the equipment. So if you have a particular question about what is a legal bat, what are the uniform requirements, etc., you'll find that in Rule 1. Also the layout of the field. Rule 2 is really the heart of the rule book. It's the most important. If you only read one rule, go to Rule 2. This is your definition of terms. And if you want to understand the rules, you need to understand the definitions. Then 3 through 5 are really the rules that govern the game itself, for what a regulation game is, when time gets called, when the ball gets put in play, things like that. And then rules 6 through 9 are the 4 key individuals within a game: the batter, the runner, the pitcher, and the umpire. What we're going to cover today are rules only for teenage baseball. So we're not going to be covering obstruction, interference, base awards, things like that. For those, you need to attend a basic rules clinic. And District 4 every year runs a 4-part basic rules clinic on Zoom. And these cover all the basic rules that you will find in all divisions of baseball and softball. We record these sessions, and again, you can go to YouTube. There is the correct address, at CAD4, California District 4. And if you go there, you will see that we already have, for this year, the first 3 rules clinics have been held and are up. and you can watch any of those at your own leisure. We do have one more, and that'll be next Wednesday. So if you want to go to it and experience it live, it'll be February 26th from 7 to 8:15, but you do have to register on the District 4 website, and we'll get to how to get there in a little bit. So let's start off with the new rules for 2025. You'll find these in the rule book. They've already been updated to your rule book app. So we're not going to go through all of them. Some are just about softball, some aren't really relevant. So we'll go through the key ones that you should know for teenage baseball. So the first is that we used to require a background check. It could be done through a couple of organizations. Now it has to be done through JDP. You, as a manager or a coach or an umpire, should have already done your background check. If you haven't, you need to do that, because if you provide regular services to the league or repetitive access and contact to players, you need to do a JDP background check. What you also have to do is you also have to take the Little League abuse awareness training. No other training is acceptable. We used to use USA Baseball. Now it has to be the Little League abuse awareness training. It must be completed each and every year, and it must be completed after October 1st. So how do you get to that training? Well, go to the District 4 Little League website, and you can see at the bottom, that's the URL for it. And on the side, just click on LL Forms, Little League Forms. Click on that, and it will take you to this page. Has a lot of forms on it, but important for you, it has the abuse awareness training. For you as managers or coaches, you should also do the concussion training, the sudden cardiac arrest training, and the diamond leader training. So all those links are in there. Most of these trainings take no more than a half hour, 40 minutes at most. For those of you who are umpires, you should take the concussion training, the abuse awareness training, and the sudden cardiac arrest training. And I would advise the diamond leader training. So click on that abuse awareness training, and it'll take you to Little League's abuse awareness training course. And it's very easy to complete. And again, takes about a half an hour. This is a significant change for this year. Little League has deemed that choke up assists, choke knobs, thumb guards are now illegal, And they also make the bat itself illegal. So anything that's been added to the bat after manufacture is going to make that bat illegal. We'll talk a little bit on what the punishments are for using an illegal bat. Neoprene sleeves. Pitchers used to be able to wear these, but they had to have a long undershirt covering them. Now they no longer need to be covered by the undershirt. They need to be a solid color, and they just can't be gray or white, anything that sort of looks close to the color of a ball. Jewelry is now legal, so you're going to see players bring out the bling. So the only jewelry that is to be removed is jewelry that poses harm to injury. In other words, jewelry that can harm or injure the player who's wearing it or another player on the field. So some things to consider. This isn't going to be necessarily something you have to worry about in 50-70 junior baseball, but hoop earrings, any kind of dangling kind of earrings that can get caught and ripped out, rings that can sever fingers. And if you've ever seen a finger almost severed by a ring, you do not want to see that. There's really no reason why a player should wear a ring out there. Watches, the glass can shatter, plus they're not considered jewelry anyway, so no watches. And also nothing sharp that has sharp edges that can injure another player, cut another player, for example. What's legal, what should be taken off in terms of jewelry. This is really up to your own leagues, and it will be a decision also by the umpires umpiring your game. Also, Little League is now permitting batters and catchers' helmets to have stickers. They can't be repainted still, they can't be taped, but you can have stickers on helmets now, provided that they're not excessive. What would be excessive? I don't know. I'm not going to go there. But also no stickers that can be considered offensive to anybody. Nothing that makes references to drugs or alcohol, for example, or violence, obviously. Things to consider is make sure those stickers don't cover the NOC label, and make sure those stickers are not covering cracks in the helmet. When we're using a continuous batting order, and if you're playing interleague, you will be using a continuous batting order. Know that when you're using a continuous batting order, players appearing offensively for the first time who get on base are not required to meet the mandatory play running requirement. In other words, it used to be the first time a player came up to bat and got on base, they would have to run the bases. Now they can be replaced with a courtesy runner. And now Little League explicitly allows for 2 courtesy runners if you happen to have your pitcher and catcher on base at the same time. Prior, the rule didn't seem to allow it. Now, when you're using a continuous batting order, you can have a courtesy runner for both your catcher and pitcher at the same time. This is a significant rule change, and it has repercussions. And that is that prior to this, 301 used to state that umpires, please do not draw on the screen. So we have marks on there. If you can erase those, get rid of those, please do that, but please do not write on the screen. So it used to be that umpires were required to check equipment before the game. We are no longer, as umpires, required to check equipment. We are still required to make sure there's strict adherence to all the rules prior to a game. For example, players warming up with bats have to have a batting helmet on. Catchers who are warming up a pitcher need to have the catcher's helmet and throat guard on, those kind of things. We have to make sure of those rules. Then at the plate meeting, umpires are required to confirm with the manager that all the equipment that they're going to use for their team are proper and legal under Little League rules. So you will get asked that question. Are your players properly and legally equipped for the game of Little League baseball today? And you need to answer with yes. You can't nod your head. You can't say, I think so. You can't say, I don't know. And if you don't say yes, we don't have a game. So you need to say yes. By you saying yes, the responsibility has now been placed on you, the manager, for legal equipment. And this is what is very significant. Now, during the regular season, if illegal equipment is used during the game, the manager and the player using the illegal equipment will be ejected from the game, and they will not be allowed to play at the next physically played game. So, what is considered illegal equipment? Illegal equipment is only for bats. But what if a catcher's helmet doesn't have a throat guard, or you're using a skull cap, or a traditional batting donut, or a catcher's using the wrong kind of glove? That is considered improper equipment. It's not considered illegal equipment. It doesn't lead to ejections. Now, what I have as the UIC for the district, I have been telling all of your UICs and your league presidents that umpires should still check gear. We want the players the player's safety to be foremost, and umpires checking gear helps out with that. And we also want it to be legal. The last thing we want to do as umpires is have to eject a manager and a player for an illegal bat. So umpires still should check equipment. Little League is now allowing, and only in this instance, one-way communication between the manager and the catcher to call pitches. So I want to emphasize each part of this. It's a one-way communication device. That is, the player on the field cannot be able to communicate into the dugout. It must be only used by the manager or coach. It has to be used in the dugout. It is only to be connected to the catcher, not the pitcher, for example. It can only be used on defense, and it can only be used to call pitches. It cannot be used to call throwdowns to a base, for example. The rule is now revised for an illegal bat, and now this is really in conjunction with what we have in the All-Stars anyway. What it adds to using an illegal bat is we had the rule before, which is if a batter steps into the batter's box with an illegal bat and it's discovered before the next batter steps in, the batter is out and the team loses an adult base coaching position. But now what has been added is that if it's discovered during the game that a player has used an illegal bat, both the player and the manager will be ejected. And we always want to remove the bat from the game. So that bat right there is an illegal bat because of that choke-up knob. Okay, let's talk about safety and equipment. So when umpires check helmets, what are they looking for? And you as coaches and managers, at some point after you've gone through this clinic, you have a good understanding of what we're looking for. So have all your players bring the bats that they use, their helmets that they use, and check them sometime during practice, and try to get rid of those helmets, those bats that they shouldn't be bringing to a game. So when we check helmets, we make sure that it has the NOCSAE standard insignia on it. We make sure there are no cracks in the helmet. We look inside the helmet to make sure all the padding is there. There's no missing padding. The padding isn't ripped and frayed. And if the helmet has a cage on it, it isn't required at all. But if it does have a cage, we require that all the screws are in place and they are tight. What isn't allowed? Chrome helmets, helmets that have been painted after manufacture, and no batting helmet can have pine tar on it, even if it is completely dried. So, needs the NOCSAE certification, no cracks, no missing padding, can't have pine tar, even if it's dried. If it has a cage, all screws must be in and tight, and it can't be repainted or chromed. A lot of players in intermediate and juniors use what we call a C-flap, which is perfectly fine. It's advisable, adds extra protection for the batter. But there are a couple of rules about it. One, no new holes can be drilled in the helmet to be able to accept the C-flap. And the manufacturer of the flap must match the manufacturer of the helmet. So if you have a Rawlings helmet, you have to have a Rawlings C-flap. What you see on the left side is a helmet that has a generic C-flap, and this would not be allowed in a game. When we look at catchers' helmets, we're looking at, most importantly, that they have what we call a dangling throat guard. Even if you have the hockey-style helmet, it has to have that dangling throat guard. We call it dangling because it needs to dangle. It needs to have play in it. And it's a requirement. We don't allow helmets out there that don't have the dangling throat guards. We also make sure that it's NOCSAE approved. We make sure all the screws are in and tight. And just like batting helmets, we make sure that all the padding is in there. Skull caps are not allowed in Little League at any level. So again, catcher's helmets have to have the throat guard, NOCSAE certified, no missing loose screws, padding in place, the throat guard dangles, and no skull caps. So when does a catcher have to wear parts of their gear? Whenever a catcher is doing infield, outfield practice near a bat, they have to have on a catcher's helmet and dangling throat guard. That's the only thing that's required. When a catcher is warming up a pitcher pregame or during the game, they need to have a catcher's helmet and they need to have a dangling throat guard. And then during the game, the catcher needs a helmet with a dangling throat guard. If they're a male catcher, they have to have a protective cup. I don't know why you would want to go out there without one, but it happens. And they must wear a catcher's mitt. They cannot use a fielder's glove. And they must have a chest protector. It can be either the long or the short version. And they need shin guards. What do we look at when we look for bats? We look for damaged bats, cracked bats that are dented, that have a sharp edge. A defective bat is not an illegal bat, but it's still a bat that's dangerous and we want it out of the game. So we will remove bats that we believe are damaged. And if an umpire believes a bat is damaged, it shouldn't be in the game. That is not protestable. We're not going to catch everything, but as much as we can catch defective bats, we want to do it so that things like this don't happen on the field. I want you to watch the umpire and watch what flies by his head. So it's a reason why we check bats. Now, I just talked about damaged bats. We just remove them from a game, but an illegal bat is a different animal altogether. What are illegal bats? Well, they've been altered. Post-manufacture, maybe the interior has been shaved, or that it doesn't meet the length or diameter requirements. And we'll go through that in a minute. That it doesn't have the proper label if it's a composite bat. It must be either USA bat or BBCOR. That the USA bat or BBCOR label is unreadable. All BPF bats are illegal in Little League. They used to be the bat we use. Now they are all illegal except for softball. Any bat that has a choke knob, a choke assist, or a thumb guard on the player's thumb, that will also make for an illegal bat. And pine tar, even if it is dried, makes that bat illegal. So what are the bat specifications for intermediate and junior level? They're both the same. If you're using a non-wood bat, it has to have a readable BBCOR or USA bat logo on it. If you have a wooden bat, wooden bats are perfectly legal and fine to use. You don't have to have it labeled. And in fact, it won't be labeled. If you have a BPF logo bat, it will be illegal. The barrel diameter, maximum 2 5/8 inches, and it cannot be any longer than 34 inches. So these are the logos that have to be on it, USA Baseball or BBCOR certified. It cannot be one of those BPF bats. It also must have a grip or a cork if it is a non-wood bat, some kind of tape that isn't a slippery tape that extends a minimum of 10 inches from the small end. So do not use electrical tape. And we do not allow traditional batting donuts. You can use a batting sleeve. And don't ever put those kind of donuts on your bat because it's a waste of good donuts. Okay, let's go through a few of the regulations that we find in the first part of the rule book. So there is mandatory play. It's required, and the mandatory play is every player who shows up in uniform at the game and can play is required to have at least one at bat and 6 defensive outs. There are no exceptions to this, even if the game is shortened because of the run rule, a time limit, weather, or darkness. What is the penalty if a player doesn't get in their mandatory play? Say the game is regulation and you have a player that only got to bat once and play only 3 defensive outs. What happens? That player is required to start the next game. They then have to complete the mandatory play requirement from that last game. So in our example here, they had one at bat, 3 defensive outs. So what they will have to do is start the next game and play 3 innings of defense to meet the requirement from the last game. Then they must remain in the game and meet mandatory play for that game. And only at that point can that player be removed and sit on the bench. If your team has a very large roster, and if it's 15 to 20 players, and at least 15 of those eligible players show up at the game in uniform, mandatory play is reduced in interleague to 3 defensive outs and 1 at bat. And that's just to try to get all those players their time into the game. Prior to the game, you show up at the game site and you start warming up on the field. Only managers, coaches, and players and umpires are allowed on that field. Yeah, if a groundskeeper is or somebody lining the field doing the chalk, that's fine. But you can't have any parents out there. You can't have any extra coaches. So per team, only 3 adults are allowed out onto that field pregame. And then even during the warm-ups. And then during the game, you can again only have 3 adults. You have a manager and you can have up to 2 adult coaches. And you must have an adult in the dugout at all times. There is a player in that dugout. Because you're doing 50-70 in juniors, you have an on-deck batter. And where do you position that on-deck batter? There should be a place on the field for that. You're trying to keep them out of danger. But what they cannot do is they cannot cross over. If they're left or right-handed, they cannot cross over behind the plate and go to the on-deck batting circle on the other side of the field. They must remain on the side of the field of their dugout. And you can't be moving the on-deck batter circle. Okay, Don, do we have any questions from this first part?
We do, Jim. Let me go back and try to start here. First one is just for clarity. So improper equipment that's found during the game is just removed and no penalty. That's correct?
That is correct.
But if I find an illegal bat sometime during the game, then there is the penalty, correct?
That is correct if it's used during the game.
Okay. Here's a question. You partially covered it.
Can I break in again?
Yeah.
Please don't write on the screen. Thank you.
You partially covered requirements for catcher. Are there any other protective equipment requirements for players who are not catchers? We've had a lot of discussion about this in our league. Some say that players need to wear athletic supporters. Is this true?
No, and I couldn't imagine anybody checking on that.
Well, that's the second part of the question. If cups are required for catchers, what do you recommend we do to confirm that players are wearing cups?
I simply ask them.
Okay. Question about helmet with cheek protector. So I know the question is, player has a Rawlings helmet, also has a Rawlings cheek protector, but they are different colors. Is that going to be an issue?
That is not an issue. Just to confirm, in 50-70 and juniors, BBCOR, well, USA bats are allowed or not? USA bats are allowed, BBCOR bats are allowed, BPF or any other kind are not allowed.
So the question really is, are USA baseball bats allowed in juniors? I thought they were limited to BBCOR.
No. It's when you move up to the senior division that you get rid of USA bats.
Okay. Pine tar. Can my players use a spray adhesive grip enhancer?
No, they cannot. So what the rule states is that you cannot use pine tar or a similar substance. And anything that is a sticky spray is not allowed.
Okay, those are the questions, Jim.
Okay, thank you. All good questions. Okay, let's talk about interleague rules here. So remember what these are. When you play an interleague game, you're going to be playing by interleague rules. And the games are played under the official Little League rules, as we've talked about in the rulebook app or the rule book. But where those local options arise, District 4 has decided what those options will be. And those are really what the interleague rules are. And you cannot play by local rules. So if a team comes from a different league to your field, you do not play by your league's rules. When you go to another field, you do not play by that league's rules. You play by the interleague rules. And if managers try to get you to do something different in an interleague game, you need to contact Grayson. There can also be no manager agreements. In other words, before the game, the managers get together and go, oh, you know what? Instead of a continuous batting order, we want to bat 9. You cannot do that. Where do you find the interleague rules and also the pitching log, which we'll talk about in a minute? And where do you find the intermediate and junior schedules and contact information in case you need to contact another manager? Well, that is the website for that. So again, go to the California District 4 Little League website and click on Teenage Baseball. and it will take you to this page. And you can see the one arrow on the left shows the interleague rules, and there will also be a link there for this PowerPoint presentation. And on the arrows on the right, you can find the contact information, the schedules, the field locations, and also the forms, the pitching log, and a handy little pitch count record. So let's talk about these interleague rules. Okay, games can begin and continue with 8 players on either team, but it cannot go any lower than this. If you go to 7 players, the game immediately ends, or if you only have 7, the game does not begin. If you have 8 players, the 9th spot in the batting order is simply skipped over. It is not an out. A continuous batting order will be used by all teams. And when we have a continuous batting order, all the players are considered starters. All the players are placed in the batting order. Then the players can be entered, re-entered defensively anytime in the game. You can have a player play defense 1 inning, sit the next inning, play defense the next inning, and you do not have to tell the umpire about those changes. All you have to make sure is that at some point during that game, the player meets mandatory play for that game. What if a player has to leave the game? They're sick, injured, or they have a school function and they have to leave in the 3rd inning. You just simply skip over that place in the batting order. Again, it's not counted as an out. And if for whatever reason that player returns to the game, they just simply go back into the same batting order spot. What happens if a player gets on base and becomes injured and can't run? They are simply replaced by the player who made the last out. A regulation game for 50-70 and juniors is 7 innings. And if a game is called for weather or darkness, and that's solely up to the judgment of the umpire, it will be considered a regulation game if 5 innings have been completed, or at least 4.5 innings and the home team leads. And all games that are decided by the run rule, we'll talk about that, or decided by a time limit, we'll talk about that. No matter how many innings are completed, they will always be considered a regulation game. So in interleague, we have time limits, and the time limit for interleague games at your level will be 2 hours and 15 minutes. What does that 2 hours and 15 minutes means? It means that if you began an inning prior to 2 hours and 15 minutes, you will complete that inning. And if the time limit is reached, the home team does not bat if they are leading. So again, you just don't start a new inning after 2 hours and 15 minutes. But once you hit that 2 hours and 15 minutes, you complete whatever innings you are playing. And a game ended in a tie will not be continued at a later date. It's just too difficult to reschedule these games. There is also a run rule. So if a team is ahead by 15 runs after 4 innings, or 3.5 if the home team is leading, or a team is ahead by 10 runs after 5 innings, 4.5 if the home team is leading, or are ahead by 8 runs after 6 innings, 5.5 if the home team is leading, then the opposing manager will concede defeat. There are no exceptions to this rule. The game will not continue. The umpires will leave the field. You should make every effort that you can to reschedule games that are canceled for some reason, especially weather early in the season. So try to do that. And Grayson, can you answer this? Is this something that you get involved in, or is this decided between the two managers?
It's decided between the two managers, and then once they have determined a new date, then they would let me know. So I can update the master schedule on that.
Okay, thank you. Protests. Protests should be settled on the field of play. We discourage protests. Listen, this is a recreational game. There's no direct standings that are kept. Of course, if you have a couple teams at your level and it may decide whether you go to TOC or not. But just know that if there are protests, it can only be about rules interpretations. In other words, you believe the umpires misapplied a rule, or that there's been an ineligible player or pitcher used. If you do want to protest, and it is your right to do it, we discourage it, but you do have the right to do it. You need to fill out a protest and you need to email it to Grayson within 24 hours of the game. Grayson will then make a decision on the protest. His decision is final. He is the king of protests. Okay, we will enforce 1 foot in the batter's box. There's a lot of confusion about this rule, about when a batter has to stay in the box, when they don't. There's actually 8 exceptions to when they can step out of the box. Here is a much easier way to remember this rule, that when a player steps in the batter's box with 1 foot, they have to keep at least 1 foot in the batter's box. If a pitch is a called strike, not a swinging strike, but a called strike, or it's a ball and it doesn't force the batter out of the box, and the catcher catches the ball, not that they field the ball, but they actually catch the ball in flight, that the pitcher stays at the mound area and there's no further play, say a throw down on a steal, then the batter must keep that foot in the box. Courtesy runners are allowed, and it can only be for the pitcher or catcher of record when there are 2 outs. What does it mean to be a pitcher or catcher of record? It means whoever was the catcher or pitcher when the last out was made on defense for your team, who was the pitcher, who was the catcher, they are the only 2 who can be run for. It is not for who will be your pitcher next inning or who will be your catcher the next half inning. It's only who was the pitcher and catcher, and there must be 2 outs. It's going to be the player who was the last out, and if both the pitcher and catcher are on base, you can a courtesy run for both of them. It'll be the last out and the second to last out. We do not use, with a continuous batting order, we do not use pinch runners or special pinch runners. Stealing of signs, this rule and the penalties for it are going to be enforced. So if a player or a coach or a manager is stealing signs and relaying them to alert a batter of pitch selection or location, it's considered unsportsmanlike behavior. The first time it's discovered, there will be a warning. The second time, there will be an ejection. And this is what this generally looks like. It's generally a player on second base. You can see he's clapping, and now he actually raises his hand to designate where that pitch will be. The umpire saw it and is calling time. Here, you can see the second base runner is signaling where that will be. That was actually in a Little League World Series. That player was ejected and didn't get to play the next game also. Umpires. The home team is going to provide 2 umpires for each game. Hopefully your leagues have figured out how they're going to provide umpires. It would probably behoove you as a manager to check with your umpire in chief for your league to find out how the umpires are going to be provided and to make sure they are provided. The last thing you want is for a team to travel to your field from another town and there are no umpires. Know that for 50, 70, and juniors, if a youth umpire is used, the other umpire, and there needs to be two umpires, must be at least 18 years of age. So, in other words, what we're saying at this level of play, for how complex the game is and how tensions can rise more with this level of play, we really want at least one adult on that field. We also realize that there may be times where only youth umpires are available, umpires under 18 years of age. If that is the case, it is mandatory. It is mandatory that there is an adult game coordinator who is at that game. It cannot be a coach or manager. It can't be the scorekeeper. It can't be somebody in the snack shack. And it can't be somebody who is covering two games as a game coordinator. They must be at that game site and they must remain at that game site. What I advise youth umpires is if they show up for a game and they're going to be the umpires, there's no adult umpire, and if they are told there is no adult game coordinator for that game, I tell those youth umpires, do not umpire that game. This is a little league rule. Okay, I want to go through some points of emphasis that for interleague. You're going to exchange lineup cards. You're going to have a meeting between the umpires and the managers at the plate. And at that plate meeting, by the way, the coaches and the players will remain in the dugout. And so what you need to do is you need to fill out a lineup card, a 4-part lineup card. And you're going to keep those 3 copies with the original. It's the umpire who will rip them apart. So those lineup cards need to be filled out completely. Put your team name, put the date, put if you're home or away. And for the manager, put your full name. Don't just use your last name. We as umpires use those to then start addressing you by your first name. For each player, you need to have a minimum of a first initial and a last name. You're not going to put Joey, Eddie, or Eddie V and Tommy S. You're going to have a first name or a first initial, and you'll have a last name. You're going to put their jersey numbers on that lineup card. And for those players who are starting on defense, you're going to designate where they're playing by a number, catcher 2, shortstop 6, for example. And do not include the names of players who are not at the field, even if you believe that player is going to show up late for the game. Do not put their name on the lineup card. When that player shows up, if you want to insert that player in the game, and it's up to you as a manager to decide. You don't have to. I would hope you do, but you don't have to. When that player shows up, then go to the umpire and give that information to the umpire, and they will add it to their lineup card, and it'll be added to the scorebook. Remember that you cannot challenge judgment calls. Safe, out, fair, foul, ball, strike cannot be questioned. You cannot be chirping about the plate umpire's strike zone during the game. You cannot express disappointment or outrage, either verbally or physically, to judgment calls by umpires. What if you believe that the umpire did make a mistake? Say they used the wrong rules interpretation, or you believe that something happened on the field and that umpire may not have seen what happened. How do you deal with this? Well, you as a manager, and it will not be the coach, we as umpires are instructed that if a coach approaches us, we tell the coach, listen, if your manager has a question, your manager is free to come out and talk to me. So you as a manager request time, wait till time is granted. You don't just yell time and start marching out into the field. Go to the umpire who made the call. And if there's an adult and a youth, don't automatically go to the adult. If the youth made the call, go to that youth. Don't begin talking to that umpire until you get out to them. A good umpire will meet you halfway on the field. Don't yell at that umpire. I can tell you what I do. If a manager comes out and just starts yelling at me, I send the manager back into the dugout and they don't get to talk about what just happened on that play. And then just have a conversational tone. And this goes for the umpires also. The best thing that you can do as a manager is to ask a question. Umpires are trained when they meet you to address you by your first name and to ask, "Hey, Bob, do you have a question?" Or "What's your question, Bob?" And then ask the question. Hey, did you see that first baseman pull their foot? Or, hey, the way I saw it wasn't the first baseman juggling the ball when my player stepped on the base? Or I saw my shortstop tag that runner between first and second. What did you see? So you're asking a question, and then you have a discussion with the umpire. Now, the umpire may stick with their call. "Listen, Bob, I saw that. That's my call. I'm 100% sure of what I saw. I had a really good angle on it." But it's also possible that the umpire maybe didn't have a good angle. So you can ask that umpire, "Hey, do you mind? Can you get some help from your partner?" Assuming you have two umpires on this game. Uh, and then it's up to that umpire to decide to go talk to their partner or not. They may say, "No, I'm not going to in this case. I know what the call was. I got it right. Let's play ball." If, however, that umpire says, "Yeah, I'll go talk to my partner," then what you need to do as a manager is return to your dugout and the two umpires will discuss the call. Whoever made the call will then confirm or overturn their call. Listen, if you still disagree with it, if it's a rules interpretation, you can protest the game. You have that right. Now, safety. I want to go through what we as umpires see as the most common safety violations and concerns that we run into in games at the 50, 70, and junior level. The first is illegal or damaged equipment, illegal bats, and especially bats that have pine tar. We run into helmets that don't have the proper padding, that part of it's torn off, or that's missing screws if it has a face guard on it, that the C flaps don't match the manufacturer of the helmet, or that you have catcher's helmets and there are no dangling throat guards. We as umpires will try to catch this stuff before the game starts because we will ask you to put all your equipment out of the dugout in front of the dugout so that we can check it. What good umpires will then do is they will walk along the fence and look into the dugout, not go into the dugout, but they'll look into the dugout. If they see any other bats or helmets or catcher's helmets, they will ask that to be brought out. If your player says, "Oh, I don't use that bat," then we say, "Hey, it's in the dugout, bring it out here." And then we go through it. So you want that to happen. We also especially see catchers before games warming up pitchers or taking infield or outfield practice near a bat not wearing a catcher's helmet. We also see players with bats who are not wearing a batting helmet. If a player has a bat before the game during warm-ups, if they have a bat or they're near a bat, they have to have a batting helmet on. Also, male catchers who don't wear an athletic cup. And again, I don't know why anybody would want to be catching without a cup if you're a male catcher. Also, another thing that we see less of it now, but occasionally we see fields that don't have breakaway bases. These are especially fields that are high school fields. There is a rule in the rule book that states that a Little League game can only be played on a field that has breakaway bases. What I, as a district umpire in chief, instruct my umpires is if you show up to a game and there are not breakaway bases, do not umpire the game. Let the team have time to maybe go run to another field to get safety bases and bring them back. That's fine. If the game starts a little late, that's all right. But if they don't have breakaway bases, game should not be played. It's a danger to your players. The last thing you want is kids breaking their ankles or breaking their wrists, sliding into a base. We also see frequently dugouts that don't have at least one adult in them during the game when there is a player in the dugout. So we will constantly remind you, hey, Bob, you need an adult in the dugout. It's one of the rules of Little League. Also, players handling bats in the dugout. The only time a player will be touching a bat in the dugout is when they pick up the bat to walk out to go to their at bat, or they come back into the dugout and they place the bat against the fence or in the bat holder. Those are the only times they have it. If they're going to be the next batter up, they're not going to be in the dugout holding the bat. Also, safety concern, and is that we see managers and coaches bullying and verbally abusing players. Little League has gotten so much better over the last so many years over this issue. Little League does not tolerate bullying or verbally abusing players. Unfortunately, however, we still see it. And as umpires, we have the right to stop you as managers or coaches from bullying or verbally abusing players. And this can be things like yelling out from the dugout to your players, hey, catch that ball. If you don't catch that ball, I'm going to remove you from the game. Get your head in the game. We do not do that as coaches. These are youth. We do not yell at them. Also, another safety concern is pitchers who are pitching both in Little League and travel ball in the same season. Now, there is nothing in the Little League rule book that states that if a player is playing in another league, that Little League has to acknowledge that in terms of the number of pitches they can pitch. But you as managers know what your players are doing, and you should stay by what the Little League rules are of how many pitches a pitcher pitches, and to stay within that limit and to provide the days of rest. So what we don't want to see when we show up to games is in the pregame warmup, a bunch of players with bats and no batting helmets. So none of these players have batting helmets and they all have bats. We also don't want to see catchers warming up pitchers without their catcher's helmets on. Why? Because of this. And I cut the video off at that point because there is a big F-bomb that comes right after that. And we also don't want to have players handling bats in the dugout because we don't want this to happen. Okay, Don, do we have questions?
Do Jim, let me see if I can go back and make sure I cover them all. So here's a question for Grayson. Are you still around out there, Grayson? But how will
Yep.
we be notified if a game is canceled due to rain? Who makes that decision?
Yeah, the home team will make that decision. We talked about making sure there's constant communication between the managers, especially if there's upcoming rain. But the home team will make that decision. They should reach out to the visiting team. Also, if you're the visiting team and there's potential for rain or there has been rain, definitely reach out to the manager beforehand and just to make sure that the game's on before you travel out there.
All right, so now we have a question about courtesy runners. So are courtesy runners for pitcher and catcher with 2 outs mandatory? Or is it an option?
It is an option. You do not have to do it. You know, if it's your pitcher and he's your best base runner and really fast, leave him out there.
Okay, question about umpires. So this might be Jim, you and Grayson combo answer to this, but are 2 umpires required?
The rule or the interleague rules state that there should be 2 umpires. And that's the goal. But in reality, we know that sometimes, and listen, there aren't as many umpires anymore. And we just know that sometimes there may be 1 umpire, and 1 umpire is better than no umpires. Would you agree, Grayson?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
What are the requirements to be a certified Little League umpire to be able to do one of these games?
There is no certification except that your league president has approved you as a volunteer umpire, that you've done the JDP check and that you've done your abuse awareness training. And hopefully, ideally, you have gone to trainings and you have attended or at least watched the rules clinics that we provide. But that would be up to your UIC as to if you are qualified, your umpire in chief, to be able to do one of these games.
Okay, here's kind of a direct question from one of the leagues. My league has no adult umpires. Does that mean we can't play in the interleague?
No, it does not. It means you'll be using youth umpires for your home games, and you will also be using an adult game coordinator. And what you should do is you should put pressure on your league board to try to figure out a way to bring adults into your league to umpire, especially at this level.
Okay, here's a question. Can coaches warm up pitchers?
Yes, perfectly legal before the game, during the game, in the bullpen, out on the field, anywhere, anytime. Coaches can warm up pitchers.
Okay, so just as we were answering the earlier question about not having any youth umpires or having any adult umpires. So 2 comments came in, one from a league who said, we are converting all game coordinators to umpires. If someone volunteers to be a game coordinator, we're just going to tell them they're the base umpire.
Great. That's I think that's something you've been pushing for leagues to do for a while, Don, which is if you have an adult there, why have them on the other side of the fence? Get them out on the field.
Okay, and then here's another question is, what does a game coordinator actually do?
We actually have on their District 4 website, our YouTube channel, we have a YouTube on that of what the game coordinator does. Basically, the game coordinator is the advocate for that youth umpire. They are there to make sure that nobody attempts to bully or yell at that umpire, that youth umpire feels safe at the game. The adult coordinator will come onto the field and be a part of the um, uh, meeting between the managers and that youth umpire. And that adult coordinator will be at that game at all times and will render any kind of assistance to that youth umpire that they may need.
Okay. Those are our questions, Jim.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to spend a bit of time on pitching because pitching is very important. And I think there's a lack of understanding of some of the pitching rules and regulations. And we also want to make absolutely sure that you are not violating the pitching rules, especially when it comes to the safety of those young players and that you don't be wearing out their arms. So when you play interleague, all the interleague pitching rules are exactly to book. And you'll look in Regulation 6 and Rule 8. Those are what they're played by. There's really only two exceptions, and we'll talk about that. And the first is with pitching logs, and the other is with an age restriction. So, pitching logs. Every team that plays interleague, the manager must have a pitching log for each game. They must show up to the game with that pitching log. And that pitching log shows who has pitched in previous games, the date, and the number of pitches and the threshold. We'll talk about what a threshold is in a little bit. How do you get that pitching log? Well, you go to the website, you go to that page that I showed you for teenage baseball, and you click on forms, and this is the District 4 pitching log. After every game, you need to fill this out, and you can see that it has a place for team manager initial and opposing manager initial. So at the end of the game, managers are going to get together. They're going to initial each other's pitching log, and you will carry that to each and every game. What's also you can download is a pitch count tracker. You don't have to have these filled out, but it really is a handy way to know what the pitching limits are for your pitchers and to figure that out. So what happens if you're a manager and oops, you forgot your pitching log at home? If the manager of a team, if you cannot produce a current pitching log before the start of the game, each of your team's pitchers may only pitch 20 pitches. There will be no threshold. 20 means 20. Pitcher goes 20 pitches. They're in the middle of pitching to a batter. You stop and you replace that pitcher with another pitcher. If you cannot produce that pitching log before the start of the game, the opposing manager can file a protest if they believe an illegal pitcher was used in the game. In other words, maybe they're in contact with the opposing manager that you just played, and the opposing manager tells them, oh, yeah, Eddie pitched 85 pitches 2 days ago, won't be able to pitch in your game. And you don't have the log, but you want to pitch Eddie. You can protest that. And that's referred to Grayson, and he will review it and will make a decision. And I can guarantee you, Grayson is always looking out for the safety of these kids. Under all circumstances, however, even if you don't have a pitching log, still play the game. Okay, I talked about threshold exemption. So what does that mean? Little League has requirements that you're only allowed to pitch so many pitches in a game, or that if you pitch so many pitches in a game, then you have to have a certain number of days of rest. Or if you've pitched so many certain number of pitches in a game that you then can't be a catcher for the rest of that day. So what Little League allows in a lot of these situations is what we call threshold exemption. If you meet a limit, if you're a pitcher and you meet your limit, like you're limited to 85 pitches in a game, and you've hit your 85th pitch pitching to a batter, we still allow you to continue to pitch until that batter reaches base, then the pitcher needs to be pulled, or that batter is put out, or the third out is made to complete the half inning, or the game comes to an end, or you as a manager just decide, I want to remove this pitcher. So even though you may go over the requirement, you actually pitch 90 pitches, you will be credited for only pitching 85 because of that threshold. So what are the pitching regulations on number of pitches, etc.? So in intermediate and juniors, it's determined by age. If you have an 11 to 12-year-old, they can only pitch 85 pitches in a game. If they're 13 to 16, they can only do 95 pitches. And that threshold exemption is allowed. Here is that other point that this is an interleague rule. That is, no 15-year-old pitchers are allowed to pitch in juniors. So the only pitchers that can pitch in juniors have to be 14 or younger. So what if you're a 14-year-old or younger? What about days of rest? Well, say you pitch 30 pitches in a game. You need a calendar day of rest, which means you pitch 30 pitches on Monday. Tuesday, you cannot pitch. That's your calendar day of rest. Then on Wednesday, you can come back and pitch. And this is what I was referring to earlier, that if you have a player who's doing travel ball, hold them to this also. You want to protect that kid's arms. And again, threshold exemption is allowed. If you pitch 20 pitches and you're still pitching to a batter, you can continue to pitch to that batter, but you'll only be credited with 20 pitches and you don't need a day of rest. And again, no 15-year-olds are allowed to pitch in juniors. If you catch 4 or more innings in a game, you cannot pitch that calendar day. And catching a single pitch constitutes an inning, not warm-up pitches. So say your catcher catches 3 innings, and then they come out to catch the 4th inning, and they're just catching warm-up pitches, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, I want to use him to pitch today. You can pull that catcher. They're only credited with 3 innings. If a player pitches 41 or more innings in a game, they cannot catch for the remainder of the day. And again, threshold exemption is allowed. And a player who has played the position of catcher, you've caught 3 innings or less, and then you move to a pitcher, if you deliver 21 or more pitches in that day, you cannot return to the catching position in that calendar game. And again, calendar day. And again, threshold is allowed. Intermediate and juniors, actually all levels of baseball, no pitchers may pitch 3 consecutive days. So you can't have a player, even if they pitch 15 pitches and they aren't required for days of rest, You cannot have that pitcher pitch Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. You have to have a break. A pitcher who is removed from the mound and hasn't met their limit to how much they can pitch. So a pitcher who's removed from the mound but remains in the game defensively can return and pitch any time for the remainder of that game, but they can only do it once. The key here is they must remain in the game defensively. Not only when they're removed as pitcher, say they go out to play first base, but every subsequent inning, they must still remain on defense. If for any reason they sit out an inning defensively, they cannot return to pitch in that game. Intermediates, you can't pitch more than one game in a day. So if you're trying to finish a continuing game and then you have another game scheduled after that, players can only pitch in one of those games and not both of those games. Juniors, you're allowed to do that. Doesn't happen very often, so I'm not going to read through this whole thing. But in juniors, pitchers can pitch in 2 games in a day. Intermediate, they cannot. Visits to the pitcher. You're only allowed 1 visit to a pitcher in an inning. If you come out a second time, the pitcher has to be pulled. You're also only allowed 2 visits to a pitcher per game. If you come out and visit them a third time, the pitcher has to be pulled from the mound. Any visit to a defensive player is counted as a visit to the pitcher. So if you, for example, as a manager, call your catcher over to the dugout and tell your catcher something, that will be considered a visit to your pitcher. If you go out to talk to your first baseman and second baseman on some kind of play you want them to run, that will be counted as a visit to the pitcher. An injury conference is not a visit. So please alert the umpire if you're going out to visit a player that you're worried about, maybe their arm or something. Tell the umpire will go out with you and will make sure that you do not talk strategy. The second you begin to talk strategy, that will be considered a visit to your pitcher. The smart thing to do, if you have a pitcher and you're going to remove them from the mound, and you may want to have them pitch later in the game, is do not go out to that pitcher first because they will get charged with a visit. Go straight to the umpire and tell them that you want to change pitchers. And in that way, you will not get charged with a visit to that pitcher. We see this a lot. Pitchers lick their hand. If they do it, they need to wipe off their hand. If they do it anywhere in the mound area. However, what they absolutely cannot do is they can't go to mouth to hand while they're in contact with the pitcher's plate. It will be a ball on the batter, and they will be warned if they continue to do it, they can be removed from the game. Not removed from the mound, but removed from the game. Okay, let's talk about illegal pitches. Let's talk about balks. Know that umpires should be enforcing balks from day 1 of the season. There isn't some kind of grace period where we go so many games where we just warn. If we see balks, we're going to enforce balks. We need those players to learn how to pitch properly. We're not going to be, I hope, as umpires, overly aggressive and call balks at the level of a major league game, but when there's obvious balks, we really need to call them. So there are 2 kinds of illegal pitches, which are also balks, that are different in terms of penalties from all other pitches, illegal pitches. And that is to deliver the ball when the pivot foot is not in contact with the pitcher's plate. And the second is what we call a quick return pitch, when the batter is not reasonably set in the box. There's a misconception in baseball that once the batter steps in the batter's box, they must be ready to bat and the pitcher can start their pitching motion. That is not the case. We care about the safety of those batters. We allow the batter to step into the box, become reasonably set, look out at the pitcher, and only then can the pitcher begin their motion. So what's the penalty if a pitcher violates these two rules? If there's a runner on base, it's a balk. It's a delayed dead ball, and which means that we see if a play happened after that. But if it doesn't, we call time and we advance all base runners one base, unless the batter reaches first base on that pitch and all runners advance safely a base, then we ignore the balk. The pitch is neither a ball nor a strike. It's as if it wasn't pitched, unless it's ball 4, and it will force all the runners to advance. If the pitch is actually pitched, a lot of times we'll call balk and a pitcher will just stop. If they don't pitch the ball, a pitch will not be added to the pitch count. If they do pitch the ball, then a pitch will be added to the pitch count. And this is where these two penalties for not in contact with the rubber and a quick return pitch are a different penalty. Without a runner on base, it will be a ball on the batter. If it's a regular ball, balk, and nobody's on base, it's nothing. It's a do-over. So not even a do-over. It's just, it really is nothing. But with these two particular pitches, it will always, without runners on base, will be a ball on the batter. So here's an example of a pitcher pitching not in contact with the rubber. What he was thinking, what he was doing here, I have no idea. So know that what we will see more frequently at the intermediate and junior level in terms of the foot not contacting the pitching plate is that the pitcher will just kind of lose sight of where they are, and their pivot foot will be maybe a half a foot in front of the pitching rubber. These are quick pitches, and these should be stopped and not allowed. So you can see the pitcher is already starting the motion before the batter is even fully in the box. That umpire should have called time and should have called this a quick pitch and a ball on the batter. This umpire does it correctly. In other words, before that batter is set, that pitcher is not going to bring their hands together, and it must be stopped if you're an umpire. Don't allow pitchers to do this. What about other kind of balks? Not completing a pitch, not coming set, moving the shoulder, dropping the ball, not stepping and throwing to a base, double setting. Well, the penalty is exactly the same with a runner on base as the penalty I just showed for the other two. Delayed dead ball, base runners will be advanced to base unless the runner reaches first and all the runners advance safely, one base. Again, pitch is neither a ball or a strike unless it's ball 4 and it forces all runners to advance. Then we will call it a ball. And a pitch is credited to the pitch count only if the ball is pitched. What about if there are no runners on base? It's simply nothing. Okay, so now I'm going to go through a whole series of videos going through examples of balks and what you should be teaching your players to do and not do. So there must be a discernible stop. And you'll see that with all of these, there is not a discernible stop. They just kind of blow through the stop. Again, all of these will be balks. Here, the umpire actually should have waited till the pitch came in before he called time. You can see on some of these, the umpires aren't call it. This one, they don't even call. I think it surprised them, perhaps. But not coming to a discernible stop. It even happens in the major leagues. Okay, all of those are balks. Another kind of balk is a double set, that the pitcher sets and then goes to a second set. Set, second set. That was actually, I think, 3 sets. Hands together, pausing, then moving their arms again for a second set. You have to deliver the pitch. This can happen sometimes if a player slips. Can also if they get distracted. Here, he was distracted by the catcher trying to call time. What we see in intermediate and juniors sometimes is a batter squares to bunt and it just throws the pitcher off and they just stop their motion. Okay, this is an instance where the hands come together, they then separate, but the pitch is not made. I think he was hoping nobody saw that. This one again. Hands together. And separate, doesn't pitch. Drop balls when the foot is in contact with the pitcher's plate are a balk. Even if the pitcher catches the ball, still going to be a balk. Also, not stepping off properly. So when those hands have been brought together, I think even before, the pitcher needs to step off with the pivot foot. So this is a right-handed pitcher, brought their hands together. They realize, oh, I should be in the set position. I need to step off and get into the set position because there's a runner on base that I forgot about. So what this pitcher needs to do is step off with their right foot. But actually steps off with their non-pivot foot. Here are examples of players stepping off to the front of the base. This guy just wanders off. Okay, moving the front shoulder. Before the hands have been brought together in a set position, the player can look over at first and move their whole upper body. That's not a problem. Once, however, those hands have been brought together, they cannot move their upper body. They can look over with their head, but they can't move that shoulder. So these are examples of moving that front shoulder. This is a balk that we frequently see in regular season. So again, if he just moved his head, it would be fine. But he's moving his whole shoulder and upper body. You cannot make a movement and then that isn't associated with that pitch and then pitch or throw to a base. So this is a very classic kind of balk, which is really designed to deceive that runner. So watch the front leg. So there cannot be that extra movement. You cannot feint a throw to first base. You can to third and to second, but not to first base. You need to throw the ball. So when you throw to a base, you are throwing to the base, not the fielder. So the fielder needs to be at the base. If the fielder is not at the base, it is a balk. Something happened here. Let me start that one again. Okay, something happened to this video. I don't know what was working earlier today. But you can see where the first baseman is, not at the base, and that's where the pitcher throws to him. He's not at the base, so that is a balk. So you need to step directly to the base that you're throwing at. So these are examples of players who are not stepping and throwing. It's a pitcher that steps towards home plate and throws to first. It's a little harder to tell, but you can see that that pitcher is actually, his foot goes more towards home plate than it does towards third base. Okay, and on this one, when the free foot crosses the back of the plate, the pitcher is committed to pitch. They cannot then throw to a base. The angle's a little hard to tell, but that is what happens in this case. Definitely designed to deceive the runner to thinking that the pitcher is going to go home. Instead of a pitch, they end up throwing to the base. If you find yourself in the windup and you have to change to the set position, again, as I noted, you need to step off. So what you can't do is you can't simply switch from the windup to the set position when you're in contact with the pitcher's plate. And that runner took off because the player was switching from the windup, and they thought that the pitcher was pitching the ball. Okay, do we have questions?
Jim, we got a number of questions, so see if we can put these in context, right? So pitch logs, number of questions about pitch logs. Do
Okay.
umpires need to sign the pitch log?
No, they do not.
Do umpires need to insist to see the pitch logs at the plate meeting?
No, they do not. It's actually incumbent on each manager to ask the other manager to see the pitching log. And if a manager can't produce one, then they can bring it up to the umpire at the plate meeting. And then if that's the case, then we'll go into that pitching 20 pitches.
Can we take a picture of the pitch log after the game and keep it on our phone? Or must we always have the originals with us?
I have never encountered that. I guess if a picture is okay for the opposing manager, I don't know. Grayson, do you have a policy on this?
I don't. It's a good question. I think it would be acceptable.
Yeah.
That's one way to, make sure if you forget your binder, you won't forget your phone. So
Yeah.
a binder's preferred, but a picture I think would be fine.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately what we want is kids to pitch, and we want to know how many pitches they pitch. So yeah. Don't make a habit of it.
Okay, our league is totally electronic for logging pitching, keeping score, etc. Do we have to use the pitch log to keep track of pitching of our intra-league, so our league games, as well as interleague games?
Grayson, I'm going to let you handle this one.
Yeah, it's kind of saying we need to see what they pitched in the last week. So whatever you can bring to show that this is what my team has pitched in last week. It could be a printout of the electronic. That is fine also. Preferably, again, the pitch log would be easier. I know you're going inside of interleague and within your league. That'd be ideal. But again, we just want to make sure that we have some sort of governance over seeing the pitch count.
Okay. We use Game Changer in our league to keep score, keep pitch counts. Do we still have to use the pitch count tracking sheet that you showed?
Same question. And same answer.
Okay. Okay, now we got a question about pitch count, maybe just for clarity, right? So Jim, the question is, on your slide, you showed the pitch count as 11, 12-year-olds, 85, 13 to 16-year-olds is 95. But then you went on to say that 15 and 16-year-olds cannot pitch. So can you just clarify what you said and what you meant?
Yes. So there's 11 and 12-year-olds. The pitch count is for they can only go to 85 pitches. I would have to go back. 14-year-old is 95, and is 13-year-old 95 too? Yes. So that's what I meant.
And I think to add to that is that 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds have 95, but they cannot pitch in junior baseball.
Correct.
Okay. Just for clarity, can you be specific about how the age is determined for those pitch counts? Is it actual age at time of pitching, or is it the league age?
It is the league age. So as managers, if you have a range of ages on your team, you should know everybody who could possibly pitch. You should know their league age and know their pitching limitations.
Okay, a couple quick questions about pitching, things you didn't cover, which I think we cover in our general rules clinic, but are there restrictions on players who catch for 3 innings, move to pitching, back to catching, or number of pitches caught prior to moving to pitcher?
We did cover that. So if you're a catcher and you catch 4 or more innings, you cannot become a pitcher. If you have caught for 3 or fewer innings, and you can go to the pitching position and then you pitch, you cannot pitch 21 or more pitches and return as a catcher, except in that instance, the threshold is allowed, threshold exemption.
Are there rules governing switch pitchers? Pitchers that pitch with both arms?
Yes, I've never encountered that. But you can't, just to be clear, you can't have them pitch 85 pitches with their left arm and then pitch 85 pitches on their right arm.
And I think the rule is that for each batter, they can only pitch with one arm, and then next batter, they can pitch with a different arm.
Yeah.
Okay,
I've never seen that.
right. Okay, your Bach discussion, the question is lots of good examples of things not to do. For example, improperly stepping off the pitcher's plate. What is the correct way for a pitcher to step off?
The correct way to step off a pitcher's plate is with the pivot foot first. And what the pitcher also can't do, say they've brought their hands together, they can't separate their hands and then step off.
Okay. Those are the questions, Jim.
Okay, we are absolutely on the home stretch here. We're almost done. So these are the final thoughts. And sometimes at this level of play, and we see it with senior softball sometimes, it gets a bit more competitive. But what we also have to remember always is these are kids, 15, 16, they are kids. And you got to be thinking kids first. The game isn't about the umpires. The game isn't about the managers and coaches and your win-loss record or, how well the umpires do. It's about the kids. And who are the ones who assure that those kids have a safe and fun game? I know when I am an umpire and I go out on a game, two things I always want to check off by the end of that game was I was a part of a process that was safe for these kids and that these kids had fun. So who assures that? It's the adults, it's the managers, coaches, and umpires. And we set the example by not yelling, by being role models, essentially. And we need to work together. So in Little League, we have to get beyond the idea of an adversarial relationship between umpires and managers on both sides, that we are the adults and we're the ones who have to work together. What we also need to remember always is Little League is not a sports program. It's a youth leadership program that happens to use baseball and softball to teach leadership skills. In other words, we could just as easily be using field hockey. So what we want to do is to create good, strong leaders for the future who are going to be strong members of a community, and we're trying to build our community through Little League. And rule one, it states, Little League baseball in all divisions is a game. And a game is meant to have fun, and a game is for kids. So I ask you, focus on the experience that these players have. Don't focus on the outcome of the game, of who wins or who loses. Okay, so for contact information, once again, for anything that's interleague related, has to do with schedules, has to do with anything about the games, please contact Grayson, like he said, Best is by email or texting, but if you need to call, you can call them. If you have umpire and rule issues, and not that, oh, we don't have an umpire who showed up, I'm going to call Jim Rose. No, but if you have issues with umpires, or that you have rule issues or rule questions, please always feel free to contact me. There's my email and there is my cell phone number. So what I would end with is thank you all for volunteering for Little League. And thank you all for everything you do for not only Little League, but what you do for your community and what you do for these kids. It matters in their lives. We are done, folks.